Welcome to episode 4, War in Baltimore. I'm your host, God's gift to libertarian women, Dan Hill, and this is the Gold Kulak Podcast. And today I'm coming at you with an article I found on Reuters. It's titled, "In Violence-Plagued Baltimore, Weekend Ceasefire Offers Hope," and it's written by Ian Simpson. I think that's a man's name, but I don't know what he identifies as, or if it's a gal. Anyways, this article is based on this ceasefire that came about in Baltimore because it's on pace to become one of the deadliest years in essentially a generation. There have been 206 homicides in 2017 alone, which is on pace to beat the 353 homicides in 1993. And this ceasefire is organized by Erica Bridgeford. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Bridgeford, but I grew up in Castleford, and we always got mad at people that said Castleford. So we're just going to go with Bridgeford. Anyway, she's lost 20 of her friends to violence, and so she's creating this community, action, basically, community actions, where there won't be, she wants no killings over the weekend. Starting tonight, I'm recording this not on a Tuesday, like I had hoped, but actually on a Thursday. And she claims that the ceasefire has the support of the people that are doing the violence, the gang leaders, drug dealers, and others that are kind of linked to it. And the slogan is, "Nobody kill anybody." Very clever, very short and to the point. And they have over 50 events planned, which are cookouts, peace walks, the basketball tournament, and prayer meetings. And first off, on a libertarian front, I think this in itself is great. This is what civil society is. This is when essentially the left wants to attack libertarians and say, like, you guys don't have a heart. You guys just want to look out for yourselves. And no, that's not the case at all. This is a community coming together, a local community. This isn't people, the federal government, with people from all over the United States coming in and be like, don't kill anybody, blah, blah, blah. And who do you think if Miss Bridgeford actually got the people that are doing the violence to agree with it? They're doing it because she's part of the community, part of their civil society. It's not because it's President Obama or President Trump or anyone else coming in and telling them what to do. So that is kind of a great libertarian example in and of itself about how a community can organize and do things outside of the government. And in this case, probably accomplish something that the government can't. Now, I think they did try a ceasefire over Mother's Day, and I don't think that worked out. I think they actually had a higher than normal death rate, but it was still 2 people over the course of that weekend. But still, just the fact they're organizing this, and hopefully it works. But that isn't the point that I want to make. That isn't the reason why I'm bringing this article up. It's because of something else. And now the article links the cause of this violence to a 2015 killing of an African-American person in police custody. I'm sure we all remember the violence and the rioting that was going on. And essentially this was right at the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement, the BLM movement, which, as a person from rural Idaho, I was so confused on Facebook for so long because Black Lives Matter, they'd abbreviate it to like BLM. Well, we commonly talk about BLM around here, but it means Bureau of Land Management because it's where we go and screw off out in the desert and run around and chase down jackrabbits and shoot coyotes and stuff. So that was a little confusing. Interesting side note. But and perhaps these aren't the best words to use, but I think the most interesting or most telling point in this article is the quote from, or it's not really a quote, it's a paraphrasing from TJ Smith, who's a Baltimore police spokesman. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because just last month, this is a someone involved with the Baltimore police that discovered his own brother had been killed because of this violence through a police report. It wasn't somebody knocking on his door or getting a phone call or something. It was him doing his job, and he saw a name he recognized and looked into it, however long that took, just a few minutes most likely, and found out that was his own brother. And he blames, for this violence, he blames it on repeat offenders in the drug trade, gang rivalries, and other disputes. But I want to focus on the first one because I think that's probably the most important. I think this is tied into a lot of gang violence to begin with. And it was obviously, it's not like this is an alphabetical list. It was one of the more important points to bring up first, and that is repeat offenders in the drug trade. This is what the war on drugs is doing to our communities. It's killing people. And that even stretches as far as rural Idaho. It was, I think, within the last 6 years, there's a young man found dead, stuffed inside a barrel, a 55-gallon drum, because he didn't pay a drug dealer on time. He was behind on he didn't pay a drug dealer, and so he got killed over it. And that's what's happening here. You have some of the highest homicide rates in over 20 years. And one of the key reasons is because of the drug war, the war on drugs. And it just blows my mind because I consider myself a historian. I mean, I don't have degrees and books and stuff like a Tom Woods type person would, but I went to school for history education. I spend a lot of time listening and reading and kind of surrounding myself with history. So I at least might not know the minute details or the trivia that some people would have, but I consider myself fairly knowledgeable on the overall narratives of different points of history, specifically American history. And I'm just racking my brain because did we learn nothing from the prohibition of alcohol in the early 20th century? 21st century, 20th century. Yes, 20th. Now you guys are doubting whether or not I actually studied history. But, did we learn nothing? Where all of a sudden these new realms of crimes and all this, organized crime and all this other stuff, which is very reminiscent to the second reason that TJ Smith gives us, which is gang rivalries. Mob wars were something that happened during Prohibition too, and that doesn't sound reminiscent of what's going on today in Baltimore. And it comes down to basic economics, really. If there's a demand for anything, be it drugs, alcohol, tobacco, prostitution, the market will the market will do anything necessary to fill it. I can tell you right now that if me or you really wanted a prostitute tonight, regardless of whether or not it's legal in your state, you could get on Craigslist or Backpages or Lord knows what other website, and you could probably track yourself down a prostitute. Drugs are the same. I personally have never done drugs. I don't think they're good for you or anyone, but I mean I think it causes, oh, that's going to sound great. It causes more problems than I think solutions from the prohibition of it. And it just comes down to the fact we can't legislate morality. We just can't. We can all agree racism is bad. I don't think there's a single one of us that can sit down together and have a conversation and say black people don't deserve the same rights as white people. But let's go back in time to about how you can't legislate morality. We have the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, the Supreme Court ruling in 1954, which basically says, and just quick background, and probably terrible point to interject here. Anyways, so in the 1950s, we have segregation. We have white schools, black schools, so on and so forth, particularly in the South. What Brown versus Board of Education says is separate but equal is inherently unequal, and that we should desegregate at a deliberate pace, which wasn't very good wording. The deliberate was a little bit vague, and so there's a lot of people that took their sweet time. But even though we have this legislation, that 1954 Brown versus Board of Education says segregation's done, we need to integrate schools. Schools were not fully integrated until the 1970s, I think, is the last time segregated schools integrated. So nearly 20 years later. And let's not even forget about the fact that it took 2 constitutional amendments, the 13th and 14th Amendments, to guarantee African Americans their right, along with the 1964 Civil Rights Voting Act, just to guarantee African Americans something as simple as the right to vote. So it just goes to show you we do this in good faith. We want to help. We want to be proactive. We want things to be done. It goes back to the left is always influenced by emotion, but you can't legislate this. It has to be done in other ways that is in the hearts and minds versus just straight up rules. So we're going to have to change hearts and minds and figure out ways other than just saying, you can't do this. But perhaps we go a Portugal route, and I know it's not a libertarian solution to say that the government should offer or should pay for people's rehabilitation, but maybe we should look into that. As far as fixing the drug problems, because what we're doing right now, besides just the violence in our own communities, it's destabilizing other countries. Mexican drug cartels are basically lopping off heads of cops, and they've even killed officers in America before. I think it was 2012. I remember reading an article where a drug cartel in Mexico, how brazen is this? They took out a billboard on the side of a road, and they put an ad on there that said, police, if you guys impede on our ability to do business, we will decapitate you. Straight up said that. I'm paraphrasing, but that is what it said. It threatened the police. It said, if you guys try and bust us for what we're doing, we are going to kill you. Could you imagine that happening in America? And there's even been reports that supposedly it was these drug cartels have killed officers like along the American-Mexico border. So not only is a drug war affecting us, it's affecting other countries. And I know this is a little bit shorter of an episode than normal. Well, we're getting close there. But my closing argument, what I want to leave you with, is it's not the Second Amendment that's killing people. It isn't the guns. Yes, we could reduce gun crime, I suppose, if we did like an Australian model gun buyback. But you know what? And I don't have all the statistics with me to really compare it closely, but I do know that the arson rate in Australia went up after they got rid of guns, even though like their mass shootings went down. It's really not the Second Amendment. We prove that every day because there's cities with high gun ownership rates. We even have small towns here in Idaho that's part of their city code. You have to own a gun. I believe that's Greenleaf Friends. And we don't see the same homicide rate over here. What it is the 2 Ps, and I encourage you to bring this up the next time you're debating someone about how to fix gun controls. Like, we need to do something to stop this gun crime. I agree with you, but I disagree with limiting other people's rights and impeding on the Second Amendment. Instead, what we need to fix is what I refer to as the 2 Ps. the two P's are poverty and prohibition. By and large, crime, educational performance, and so many other beneficial things are influenced by your affluency. If you're impoverished, you tend to be more likely to be a criminal, to not go as far in your education, so on and so forth. If you're affluent, you're probably not involved in a lot of gang-related violence. And prohibition is creating this gang violence. It's creating this drug war and turf war, and it's giving these people a reason to band together and shoot each other, because now it's an economic thing in protecting their turf, but they're having to do it outside the law. So that's what I want you to take away from this. The prohibition of hard drugs, and I'm not saying they're good. I can sit here and honestly tell you I've never taken a drug other than what was prescribed to me in my life. I don't think I ever will. But it's not the fact that drugs are bad that are killing people. It's the fact that we are taking them away from people that are going to do them regardless if they're legal or not, and they will get them, or they will sell them, and they will use them by whatever means is necessary. So until we look at a different solution to the problem, other than the war on drugs that has by and large failed, and we can go into imprisonment rates and everything else. The drug war has failed. Until we look at alternatives, we're going to continue seeing violence like what we see in Baltimore and other things that are similar, including robberies here in my local town that are, I've been told by a local police officer, and you can take this for what it is. It's just, I guess, hearsay more or less, but I've been told by an officer in my local town that there's some robberies that are due because of drug crime. They're trying to get some extra money, and yeah. So that's what I want to leave you with. Not Second Amendment's doing this. It's two P's. Want to focus on prohibition. War on drugs is wrong. Is terrible. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And please subscribe. And if I'm really early on here, if you could go and do me a real solid, I'd really appreciate it if you just idled on over to iTunes, left me an iTunes review. I don't know if they have reviews on Google Play or not, but leave me a review there. However you're listening, just try to help me out, because the more subscribers I get, the more reach I get, the more time I can put into this, and I can start doing more and better things and adding to the show. Anyways, I appreciate you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you for tuning in.